Hi everybody, thanks for joining us on a presentation on developer challenges for 2023. Today we're going to be discussing some of the issues that you're facing with buyer sentiment, costing issues in the development, and overall market conditions that you need to know about and consider in your planning and moving forward as a developer into the future. We hope it provides you a lot of insight, a lot of information, and helps you become a better and more successful developer throughout the years to come. Best of luck. So what we'll do is we'll get it started. So I'll welcome you formally to our presentation on developer challenges. Isn't it terrible that we're talking about challenges when this is probably the moment of greatest opportunity? What is life about? How weird that when everybody's buying and paying top price and they're all chomping at the bit, we're talking about worrying stuff. Why is life like this? Why don't we just have opportunities full stop? Why do we have to have opportunities and challenges at the same time? Because they go hand in hand. And you've got to remember, every opportunity creates a challenge, and that's what this is. We've talked about success now in the property market for quite a while, but then that success is ironically problematic, and we're now dealing with the problems of that. And we'll talk about some of those things today. So I'm going to get into it and start with what I've always considered to be the most important person in the chain. Developers forget that, without the buyer, none of us exist. Selling agents forget that it's not the developer that pays the bills, it's the buyer. If that buyer doesn't buy from that developer's got no cash. If that buyer's not on the table buying that product, the whole chain collapses. So I've always believed and given my loyalty and allegiance to the buyer because they're the most important person in the whole chain. They provide the cash and the cash flow and the stimulus and the activity that makes all of us survive. Without them, we're dead, right? And we don't give them, in my mind, due respect, okay? So that's just, my 2 cents worth. But right now, they're going crazy, and what we've got is a change in thinking in Australia. For the last decade, we've been seeing a trend away from owner-occupation. It's been dropping from what was in the high 60s to the low 60s. But these last 2 years, that's flipped on its head. For the first time in near on 20 years, we're seeing an acceleration back up the owner-occupier curve. Now, a lot of reasons for that was interest rates previously was high enough that made it cheaper to rent than own. And let's face it, if I've got to save a deposit, I've got to give something up. I've got to not go to Bali, not buy my ute, not have 7 TVs, not have watches. It's terrible. I hate sacrifice. Sacrifice is a word that's disappeared in the language in the modern age. So people have said, you know what, bugger saving for a deposit, it's too hard. And they've realised that they've got these incredible things called parents. I don't know if you know about this. It's you guys, over generous and wealthier than your parents. So they look at it and say, I don't need to do that hard yards because mum and dad did it for me and I don't know how long they'll be around, but they check your birthday every year to make sure you're there. And they calculate, and what did you say you had, mum? How many houses? How much you got in your super? How many kids are in the family? They can do division. That's the only time they pass maths, is working out their inheritance. It's crazy. Failed it at school, but get the calculator out. But what's happened is we've seen a massive trend towards early inheritance whilst people are still alive. You want a deposit on a house? I've been waiting for you to ask. Here it is. I don't know about you, when I rang my dad for that, he hung up the phone. What are you calling me for? Because in our day back then, people looked at their wealth and said, I haven't got enough to look after me, so you'll have to miss out, child. But now they go, well, I'm okay, I've got my super, I've got this, I can move it down, I don't mind giving up a bit. And let's face it, little Johnny, little Mary, they deserve it. Even though they're giving you a real hard time, you never see them, you still want to flourish them with cash. And that's what's happened. They've got the bank of parent funding their deposits. And that's the hardest thing about getting into property. A lot of people forget Australia has the highest average wage in the world. So everybody in Australia can afford a mortgage or a high rent. The only thing stopping them from ownership was the deposit, because you can't have a good time and save for both. So if the parents stump the deposit, or if I actually get a bit disciplined, or if I meet someone who's got a few extra coins, that's always helped out. So this owner-occupation surge is massive. It's gone from about 63-ish back up to 65, 66 in less than 2 years. Interest rates is a key driver in that. Everyone thinks interest rates is driving prices up. It's not, it's changing behaviour. That's the difference with interest rates. Interest rates are not the reason to buy, because the bank doesn't give you a loan based on a 2% interest. It gives you a loan based on a 6% interest. They have to factor in potential rise. But the repayment is encouraging buyer behaviour, and that's more important than cost. But a lot of people miss that in all of the cloud. And this is what matters. Now, this is critical for you to understand as developers and salespeople, because these are the clients. And 65+% of the market is this. You know, particularly in Gold Coast. I've been looking after clients that have got property in this market for ages. You guys were obsessed to giving investor stock. Little teeny apartments that were great to rent for a weekend or a week. But no, that's not good for an owner-occupier. They don't want that. They want a high ceiling, a wide lounge room, somewhere with a view. Their stock requirement is totally different to an investor. And you've got to remember, that's twice the market of an investor market. Now, you guys have to quickly change your thinking to say, hold on, why don't we provide stock that suits twice the market rather than a third of it? Simple as that. But you need to recognise this is important. And of course, population's key. Now, in the old days, particularly in Gold Coast and in Australia generally, we've always had strong population, but you didn't necessarily have permanent population. You used to have surges and then they'd disappear. But the last decade or so, they've hung around like you guys. You all came from somewhere and you decided to stay here. And that's given you a critical mass. Now, that's the same everywhere in Australia. We hit critical mass in Australia. All of a sudden, we got past 20 million population. You know, critical mass for any population centre is 1 million plus. And all of the key areas, including Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, are getting there or abouts or past really, really fast. Now, bear in mind, in Australia in the last couple of years, population increase from migration has been 0. Only expats came back like me. The border only opened, what, February? Wait till you see these guys come. And they're going to come in droves. They've been chomping at the bit, waiting to. And a lot of people forget, Australia has 25 million people. It's the same size as America. Do you know how many people live in America? 300. We've got a little bit of slack we can pick up. Do you know how many people are on the planet? 6 billion. Let me tell you, if we did a poll and said, where would you like to live out of all the places in the world? Australia would probably win that hands down. We can't win Eurovision Song Contest, but I reckon we'd win preferred destination. So this is something that, again, everyone forgets. In all the years I've been overseas, when I talk to particularly expats or anyone, I say the biggest advantage of being overseas when you're looking at Australia is that you have a key to a time machine. You can be in London and go, oh my God, look how expensive Chelsea property is. It's ridiculous. And then you can turn that key, hop in the time machine and go to Paddington and Sydney, and it's very similar. And guess what? It's 30 years ago pricing. The only difference is population growth. So if you go anywhere in the world and you're on a beach like this, it's way more than here. We have the cheapest luxury market in the world. That's why the world wants to come here. That's where you guys have an advantage of seeing it early. But when you're in it, what's that? Think about the frog in the pot. Doesn't realise that the water's boiling. Then all of a sudden you wake up and go, hold on, what happened? Now, property's really bad like that because none of us go and buy a property a week. It's just every now and again we say, oh, I've got a few bucks, shall I buy another property? And you go, hold on, what happened? Where are those cheap ones? Sorry, the pot's been boiling while you've been sitting in the water and you can't afford it anymore. And that's what property in Australia is about, because people come in and go, oh my goodness, look how cheap that is. I think I'll grab it. So that population, particularly if it's immigration, particularly if it's expats, it's huge. And of course, the youngsters coming up are fueling it. But our population driver is births, as you'll see later. And that also changes the dynamic of who the buyer is. You need to say, well, if they're going to have kids, which we are, then maybe we need that extra bedroom. 1 bedrooms aren't good enough. A classic example of that is Melbourne. It's had great population growth, but they built the wrong stock. End up in a disaster. We'll talk about that later. And supply and demand mismatch is a key element. You know, because we're having births, because we're having migrants, because we're having people that want to live permanently rather than invest, that's the stock they need. But developers are often slow to the uptake. and they build what they want, what they think is right, what they remember to be right. And we end up with this mismatch. Supply is investor stock, demand is owner-occupier. What happens? No sales, everyone's saying, oh, the market's miserable. But in the owner-occupier, it's flying, so everyone's confused. So the key is, let's not butcher good sites with the wrong stock, because the problem is if I go and buy that beachfront there at Burleigh, which is prime, globally attractive property, and then put the wrong stock on it, that site is ruined for 30 years. Ruined. No one can afford to bulldoze that building and do it again properly. No one can afford to buy 2 apartments. And what usually happens is the developer ends up not selling it. Good thing is it'll rent, there'll be holiday accommodation, no worries, but there's no supply relief. So what happens is it just sits there and you get a bad reputation. But I see developers all the time that squeeze that extra apartment per floor. No one will notice if we do that, and we get 1 extra apartment, we'll make more money. You actually make less, because when you go and try and sell it and you can't sell that last, not just the extra one you chucked on, but the 3 others that you compromise because of it, you end up having to discount those. On paper, it looks highly profitable. The architect thinks he's impressed you. You think you're going to make a fortune. And you end up being the richest poor person in town because you can't sell it because it's just not desirable. You've got to be very, very careful that you make sure that you're linking and understanding that. And of course, from a buyer, greed and fear have always been the key drivers. But what's happening in Australia, we're getting older. Now, I don't know about you, but as I get older, I get a little bit more conservative. I'm not as brave as I used to be. And that's what's happening. We've got that aging population that are downsizing, looking for lifestyle, all this stuff. But they want to be safer. They want to know that they didn't get touched up. They want what they want. They will pay for it, but they want to make sure it feels good and it's safe. So we have to make sure that they like what they want, that it's reasonable, it's well located, and they'll be fine. But they are motivated, highly motivated. Investors, they just want to make money, and that's a harder sell because they look at the numbers. What's the rent? What's the growth? All this stuff. But owner-occupiers, they go, does it have a nice kitchen? Yes, coincidentally. And what about the living room? What about the balcony? All beautiful, extra size. We put an extra metre on, an extra 2 height. I'll take it. Simple. So you want to be in that because those greed and fear aren't as big an issue for you, and you don't have to sell like you used to. I talk to a lot of people that still think they have to sell on price, on rental, have arguments with their agent. Give me an appraisal for 20 bucks a week more or else I won't be able to sell it. Well, the owner-occupier doesn't care what the rent appraisal is. But he does care the ceiling height, and he does care the width of the lounge, this sort of stuff. It's easier to do that if someone wants greed of lifestyle. That's the perfect client because they're the ones that loosen the checkbook the most. That's why, who could believe you'd sell these penthouses for 10 millions plus? It's crazy. Who's got that sort of money? Apparently a lot of people. Hard to believe. Hard to believe, but they're there. One of the things I always remind you is to listen to the language of change. It's like, it cracks me up. You know Sydney at the moment, they all go, oh, property boom's over. Shut the gate. It's all done. No, it isn't. It's just begun. Now, Sydney prices have peaked. But what people forget is that's just one domino in the whole chain. One of the things that people forget, when you hear market's booming, can't go wrong, buy, from a seller's perspective, I open the newspaper and I go, oh my God, we have a property in Sydney. We were thinking about going to the Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, wherever. Prices are going up 20%. What do? I say, don't sell this year, love. I don't go, let's sell the property and move. I go, don't sell this year. Why? Because next year we can sell for 20% more. So what does that do? It takes supply out of the market. What does that do? It pushes the prices up. But eventually the buyers say, that's too much, I can't afford it, the bank won't give me the money. So it naturally tapers off. And then they get a headline like they've just had in Sydney. Market boom over. I open the paper, I go, oh my God, I thought it was going to be in 6 months, 12 months, it's now, we've missed it. Quick, ring the agent, sell the property. And the irony is, them and 300 others do the same thing. And then we go to oversupply. And then everyone says, oh my God, there's too many sellers, not enough buyers. And then the market implodes. But ironically in Sydney, and I've seen this many cycles, many times, it's just natural, happens here, happens everywhere in the world, it's the same. But what happens is that people forget that in Sydney, more than probably anywhere I've noticed, they have what I call the idiot's premium, okay? There's a certain point in a market where people are so desperate, they know they're paying more for a property than it's worth, but they just don't care. And particularly if they're paying cash, who cares? Bank doesn't have to be involved, it's not subject to valuation, I just want it, I'm having it. I've got the money, I'm doing it. But what happens is there's not that many of those idiots around. We run out of them faster than we run out of normal buyers. But what happens is when someone hears that they got that idiot's premium price, they expect to get even more. And then when that idiot's not there and they have to take 3 or 4% less, they say the market's come down. I don't say that. I say, no, the market's rebalanced. It's not a reduction, it's a correction. But the newspaper will go, Sydney drops. And I don't know if you saw the headline last month, it was devastating. The Sydney property market dropped 0.1%. Oh my gosh. No wonder they think it's over. 0.1% is like a devastating number. Not. It's ridiculous. But the headline is what matters, because no one reads the news anymore. I don't know if you've noticed that. It's only the headline that matters. But these languages of change are there already. But you've got to listen to those because your client is listening to those. And so you've got to be aware of those. And it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You've just got to be able to have a response to it. Like, oh, aren't you lucky? But more supply will come in. That should free you up. But what that means, particularly in a place like Gold Coast, is that there are going to be more sellers. And yes, they're not going to get the idiot's premium, but they're still getting eye-watering sales prices. And it's crazy. And we'll talk about that more later. And they're going to come with eye-watering budgets into other markets similar to here. But what that means for me is I see the market split apart. And I've noticed this more in the last decade than ever before. You know, I used to, talk about they'll talk the haves and the have-nots. I don't talk about that anymore. I call it the haves and the have-a-lots. It's a big difference in change. Everybody can afford in Australia. But to me, I now call the market highly livable and bearable. They're the two sectors of the property market that I see. The highly livable is always going to remain strong because there's a lot of people that want to live in a highly livable property. Now, thank goodness, highly livable is different to us all. Otherwise, we'd have big, big issues. We'd all be fighting over that one property. So some people want to live out in the hinterland, some people want to live in the city, some people on the beach, some people at the lakes. Thank goodness. But it's got to be highly livable to that person. The more livable, the more profitable. And again, particularly in the development, if we don't service that highly livable market, 2/3 of the market, and we only give bearable, which tends to be investor stock, then guess what? You're going to be struggling to sell it. And then we've obviously got external influences. People are worried about interest rates, but not me. As I mentioned earlier, the bank's already calculated that servicing at 6%. We're at 2.5 variable. Fixed rates have now shifted up. I don't know if you've been checking, but fixed rates, you could get them at 2.5, 3% for 5 years not that long ago. Now they're at 4.5s and 5s. So they're already telling us the rates are going to go up, likely, and locking it in as a cost. So you're now probably better off to go variable than fixed, where 6 months ago fixed was way better than variable. But even if they go up, how much will they go up? 4 rate rises? Anyone think it's going to be 4? 8? Anyone think it's going to be 8? 6? 4 rate rises, 0.25% is 1%. People forget, that's going to take it, say, from 2.5 now to 3.5. 3.5 is still the lowest we ever had in Australia's history, except for the last couple of years. So I'm not worried about interest rates being a key factor, particularly because in this highly livable market, the mortgage is often a lot lower than in investor or first home buyer or whatever sector. So they're less susceptible to interest rates, and the bank, for everybody, has already factored it in. Now what it will do is it'll affect developers because their cost is going to rise, so they've been living in la-la land with great rates for a while. But it'll affect other things, sentiment, that'll be massively impacted because the media, you can see they're already beefing it up as if a 0.25% interest rate is going to smash the world. No, it won't. 2-3% might, but not 1 or 2, will still be well under historic averages. And people can already afford it. How do I know that? Because that's the law. You can't get a loan if you can't be serviced at 5s and 6s. So the next 2-3% rate rise is fully costed, fully affordable in the current marketplace. But sentiment might slow. The budget's going to be a big issue in the election. It surprises me how everyone wants to slam the Prime Minister. I don't know what's going on in this country. Thought he'd done half a decent job, but he's got a target on his forehead, big time, the way I see it. I don't think it's going to have an easy chance of winning it, but the budget's tomorrow. That's going to be very interesting. We will have a budget seminar online by Wednesday, and it's all looking pretty good. But you know, I'm not thinking this will even change things. I'm not thinking it'll change things too much. So it's just going to be another thing that happens. I'm not fussed about it. I'm expecting a change. Now, hopefully that means more social housing, a few bits, but we'll see. And Ukraine, you know, I think it's all over bar the shouting there now. You know, and you see we're so immune to it that it doesn't really matter. It's news, but it's not issues. Now, I don't know if you remember, but there was another issue like Ukraine recently. I don't know, what was it? A place called Iraq. I don't know if you remember that. That war went on for 20 years, by the way. 20 years. How did that impact you guys? Not at all. It's like watching Star Wars. Starts with in a land far, far away. You know, that's how we are now. We're immune to these things. So unless it comes to our doorstep, I don't see it'll be an issue. In all truth, what I think it could do, stimulate the biggest population drive Australia ever had from Europe. If I'm living in Europe with a whole bunch of cash, I think I'd rather be down here with this beautiful weather in Gold Coast on the beach. And let me tell you, if I'm selling my horrible place in Paris that's teeny weeny, I can come by even today with your price surge, a hell of a nice place in Gold Coast or Sunshine Coast or Brisbane or Perth, maybe not Sydney, and live like a king. So expect it to be very positive for the Australian property market eventually, because people will not be happy being that close to something that may happen. And then we've got COVID. Is that still going on here? You guys, I didn't have to wear a mask today, so I think it's all pretty thing. But we're going to keep talking about it because they made us do weird things for a long time. So they have to pretend that this is worse than it is for a bit longer and then say it's all okay. But I think it's now been officially designated in Australia as a big flu. That's the official federal cabinet came out with that. So hopefully that's behind us, but who knows? But they saw behaviour there. And again, if anything, what COVID will do to the property market, as it has, and I think I was one of the few commentators that said when COVID hit that this will be good for the property market. Everyone said 20-30% fall, end of the world. I was about the only guy, and you can go watch the video if you don't believe me, that said this will be amazing, go for it. And I think it's been pretty amazing, the property prices. And one of the reasons is people looked at their house and said, we're stuck here, we better get a good one for next time. I don't want to be in this pokey little place next time we have to get locked up. Let's get a nice backyard, let's get a nice location. Let's get a bigger wall to put a bigger TV on. That's the way it is. So people are realising the importance of owning a nice home, and that's helping Australia overall. So buyer sentiment, I think, generally is going to keep going strong. And let me tell you one of the key reasons why. This is something that I think everyone is missing in Australia. This is a massive thing, okay? The first time ever in Australia's history, an average guy, now I don't know what that person is, that average person, but probably someone from Sydney. So that's why I put it in quotation marks. But an average person can sell their property and they can get a replacement one and do the reno. Well, we've always been able to do that, right? They can clear out the debt that they had on that. That was usually hopeful. We hoped that we could not take too much of the mortgage to the next place. But then they're getting rid of that, and they can now put over $1 million cash in the bank. This is a moment that will change Australia's property market forever, okay? Because this changes sentiment. Now you might remember a couple of cycles ago on the Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast, you had Sydney people coming in their droves because they could sell their property and they could have enough money to buy a replacement and clear their debt, right? So they were very brave and very generous and everyone was happy. But then it ended. You know why? Because the stock market crashed. And they said, oh, if we move and we buy a house and we pay off the debt, we won't have any money to live on because our super fund's not as big as it used to be. Now they're selling and got $1 million cash and their super, so they don't care what the stock market does this time. And that's the big thing. I'm financially bulletproof. And let me tell you, some of these people are staying in Sydney even and having $2, $3, $4 million left over after the replacement for minor adjustment. And this is a massive game chamber in sentiment, in thought, in activity, in motivation to buy. It's all good. But you have to be servicing what they want. That's the key. Now you can see here, the big winner is going to be retirement zones, downsizing zones, lifestyle zones, because they're selling their house and they want to go and get a wonderful life. That's what it's all about. You just happen to be in the right place to do that. And don't underestimate the power of that. Now, it's in Sydney at the moment. You can't always sell your house here and have $1 million left over. But believe you me, it's already starting to happen here now. You're going to have clients that will be able to do this and have that $1 million left over in this cycle. Mark my words. Because that Sydney sider will come and say, I just have to have this property and I've got the cash to do it. Oh, have you rang your bank to see about your loan? What bank? I'm not using a loan, I'm paying cash. Oh, that's different. Let's go. You can take full advantage of this because you are one of those destination points here in the Gold Coast, but everywhere in Australia will get that. Byron, Sunshine, Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane. Everyone is going to be fueled from that. And it's life-changing for that person, it's life-changing for the seller, and it's massively market-changing for everybody. And the whole of Australia is asleep at the wheel and hasn't noticed this. They're going, oh, well, these people from Sydney have always come, they'll stop soon. No, they won't. Because last time they had a reason to put the handbrake on. The stock market crashed and it impacted them. This time they're dealing with cash. There is no handbrake necessary this time. That's the key difference. And this will change the Australian property market forever. Like it exploded in Asia, like it exploded in the US, like it exploded in the Europe. It's just a crazy shift that everybody's missing. But mark my words, you'll look back and this will be an epiphany moment for you. Just to show you quickly, here's the movement in population growth. You can see in New South Wales, last year 20-odd thousand people got out of New South Wales and moved interstate. In Melbourne, about 18,000. One of the reasons they came here from Melbourne is because your weather's now matching theirs. They're really happy to come to Queensland. They feel at home. But look where they all went. They all came here to Queensland, 40,000. But it's not just 40,000 bods. It's 40,000 life-changing people with $1 million cash after their budget to buy their next property and tart it up and clear their debt. That's the difference. We're not talking about 10 people doing this. It's not Kerry Packer sold his mansion at Vaucluse. No, this is average Mr. Joe doing it. In average suburbs. Struggled years ago to buy something for 2-3 million in Sydney, selling it for 10 now. And you know the frightening thing? The guy that bought it for 10 is bulldozing it. It's scary how much money's in the world. And let me say, this is the place, Australia, where most of the world wants to come, because when you buy for 10 million here, what you get is 2 or 3 times better than what you can get for 10 million anywhere else in the luxury property market in the world. And Australians don't see it. I've spent 27 years out of the country. You know the only people that tell me that Australian property is expensive? Australians. Get out of that frog pot, jump onto the lily pad, enjoy yourself. But they're coming here. And this is where Mark McGowan, what a clown. He should have been saying, come over here, it's dry. Instead he said, rack off, we don't want you because of COVID. Strategic mistake. He had an opportunity to say, hey, can I get a slice of that Queensland action? Missed it. It's going to be hard to then backtrack and say, oh no, I was only joking. Just for a few minutes that was only. But all the other states are going to have to start competing with you guys in Queensland to say, hey, what about us? Come to us instead. And they're going to have valid grounds, but the good thing is there's enough for everybody. There'll still be loads, even if they all go to South Australia. There'll be loads come here too. If the loads go to WA, there'll be loads come here too. If loads just stay in Sydney and go into another suburb, there'll still be loads that come here. How many properties get sold in Gold Coast, Brisbane, Sunshine Coast in a year? Bugger all compared to 40,000 people arriving. So we need the more stock, we need more activity, that's where it is. Let's have a look from a developer's perspective. You guys need to start thinking differently, okay? You need to start thinking about your supply type. Like I say, build for someone to live in the property. Even if it ends up in the hands of an investor, if it's a livable property, it's a great investment. But if it's just purely investor stock, the smallest we could squeeze in, more per floor, lowered heights, lower this, cheap that, no one's going to want it because the choices will be strong and you'll be last in the list. You've got to get symmetry to the market. You can't try and convince people that you're right and they're wrong because they're the ones holding the checks. You're the one holding the property. Guess who wins that argument? Because eventually the bank rings you up and says, I thought you were meant to have sold all these by now. Too late. Build what the market wants. You'll be surprised how rewarding it can be. You've got to get into their heads, and that 2/3. And you've got strategic intelligence. You don't need someone like me to come and say, oh, here is what a buyer wants, right? All you have to do is look inside your own head. This is not weird stuff we're talking about. This is like, oh, give me a nice sized kitchen and give me a decent sized living room and make sure my ceiling height is a bit high. And if it's a house, give me a decent backyard. Stuff that you would want. What does the Bible say? Judge others by yourself. So unless you're a person that's very unique in the world that likes to live in a tiny shoebox without a view, you know, looking at the garbage units, I'm pretty sure you've got the skills and experience that's necessary to do that. It's whether you've got the courage to do it, because you're going against what tradition has told you. But serve your customer. Just look at a better customer. They're coming. And of course, you know, one of the things that's always been an issue when people look at the new market in particular, when we're talking about development, is often the price point between what you're selling new and the established market, there's a big gap and you have to explain, oh, you don't understand. We have a brand new stove. It's different. Not as like the old stove. But the good thing is the strong market underneath is building that gap into a small amount. And so they might not have choice because availability is very thin in the established market. So, okay, buying off the plan becomes a good thing now. But it's going to take extra courage because they're hearing about builders going broke and developers may follow. They're going to hear that, you know, maybe it doesn't get delivered. So you're going to have counter argument to build confidence. You know, no, this is us, this is that. It's all good. So make sure you're looking at what they are, getting the responses ready before they ask them so you can say, yes, we've been doing this for 30 years, we've never missed a beat, whatever the case is. You know, this cost escalation is a big issue, okay? Now, obviously, hopefully you can pass as much of it on as possible. I'm a little bit skeptical, I hate to say. I'm not sure that the cost is a real cost rise. I think it's a bit of a revenge, right? Because for years, developers have been saying, build this cheaper or else I'll get it from China or whatever. Now you can't get it from China. The suppliers are saying, oh, aren't you the guy that didn't give me the contract last time because you got it cheaper somewhere else? There's a lot of people wanting this stuff today. I think we'll have to put it up. It's certainly a big issue. It's going to be a bigger issue when we're seeing builders go broke because they're not being able to pass on that cost. You're going to have to factor that into your risk assessment, starting dates, all these sorts of things. You know, I think it should be theoretically temporary, you know, but I don't think it will be. I think it's permanent. I can't imagine that the builders, given the pace of activity in the future is going to escalate, are going to be saying, oh yeah, we're able to now give you that 5-10% discount now. They're going to, oh no, that's the new benchmark. I think you're going to have to lock that into your planning. You know, and one of the things I'll remind people is, there's a little place that I've heard called Dubai. You know, there's a concept called cause and effect. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but in Dubai, years ago they had nothing and they started developing that place and building lots and lots and selling it all around the world. Lots of Russians, coincidentally. And of course, they all thought, oh, they went to a builder, hardly anything was going on. They said, how much to build this building? He said, oh, you know, $300 a metre or whatever. Oh, fantastic, we can make lots of profit. But they didn't factor in that there was lots of things being sold at the same time and that coincidentally all of them wanted to start at the same time. So straight away, from the very first moment that they took off in their market, they rang the supplier and they said, hey, can we get that concrete? Oh, sorry, mate, it's gone up because everybody else wants it too. You know, your activity is there. You need to be more mindful of your environment, how much activity is going on around you because you're all competing for the same resources, labour, etc. Now I'm hopeful that some of the big builders going broke works in your favour, because some of those workers will now come back in the system, and hopefully we can go to this old-fashioned thing called loyalty. I don't know if you remember that. They were the days where people stayed with you because you looked after them and they looked after you. That's been lost in the modern age. But I'm worried that these costs are going to be there. But what it does do is it makes you think about strategy as a developer. You know, the mindset generally for a developer is, there it is, sell the lot in a hurry. But I think the only way you might be able to survive is to be brave and say, let's sell our pre-sales, let's hold on to the rest, maybe do a mid-sale, a three-quarter sale, an end sale. Because you might have to test your luck in the market to get the profits that you want. You know, that's something that's going to be very interesting to see, whether, you know, again, developers can change mindset and be brave enough to hold. Because they'll all be worried, oh, what if it changes? The wind might change, the door might slam. But if it does, we're all in trouble anyways, because you'd have had trouble with settlements. So that's how it goes. And it goes, I think something that the industry needs to learn is how to run their books at builder level and also developer level. You know, a lot of these builders that go broke are doing bad business practices. So you need to get back in a partnership with them and make sure that everybody is on the same page, because you are their partner. They can't survive without you, you can't survive without them. So get involved in the day-to-day in a collaborative fashion rather than a client looking to get the best deal fashion. If you've got the best product, the market will carry the price. If you skimp, you'll end up with too much stock. And of course the government needs to get involved. I mean, we need more sites released in theory. But where are they? They're not generally where the property market wants to be. They'll certainly be great for the lower end, the domestic, you know, the household market, the first home buyers, because land releases tend to be further out. But we do need to see that come in. But there's this trade-off. And the biggest hassle in Australia, as you know, is red tape. You know, even if we had the best site in town that we negotiated a buy and said, let's do an amazing project and let's get it out there, we know that from idea to delivery is still 5 to 8 years. And guess what? We'll be bringing 100 apartments, 150, big project 300. That's not going to impact the market, because by the time we built it in 8 years, that 100 is not even keeping pace with demand growth. So we need to be more coordinated in Australia. And of course, entry cost is the big issue. And I talked about this as being the silent assassin. This is the big thing that needs to be sorted in the industry, and no one's talking about it in the right way. Bracket creep for stamp duty and stuff is off the charts. The government is making so much money on this, it's just not funny. You know, it needs to be part of a really important, sensible conversation. Now, I don't know if you saw, but on Friday they released the Affordable Housing Report. If you haven't seen it, I'll happily send it to you, where they talk about stamp duty and all this stuff. But nothing in that report dealt with any of the key issues, which is, why is it so high? If we have a look at, you know, what I call triple dipping, this is a problem in the whole of Australia. If you look at, say, an average property, now I'm just use Sydney as an example. If you had bought an average property in Sydney in 2000, the price, believe it or not, was $328,000. Now, if you bought that, the stamp duty was $10,000. Today, if you bought that same property, the stamp duty alone is $72,000. Why? No need. But not only that, we've now got GST. Back in 2000, that wasn't there. There's $96,000. If that was a new apartment, the GST on that apartment is $96,000. The GST is probably bigger than the developer margin. 1/11 of the sale price plus or minus the margin scheme. And then if they're a foreigner, they're now being hit up another 7 or 8% depending on the state. So you look at the revenue now from that same average home, same property, $296,000 state government revenue. Federal gets another bit of a coin out of it from the FIRB fee and stuff. But that's just state government revenue. That's preposterous. That's 18% of the purchase price. How much do you make as a developer? 5, 10 end result? You wish. 18%. Yet everyone's talking about housing affordability, but no one's saying, why is this so ridiculous? Now, I'll ask you, why do we pay stamp duty on a new property? They're making the same money and more from GST. Why? If they want to make property prices cheaper for everybody right now and more affordable, don't double dip, take that out. It's outrageous. That's what they do though. And no one's talking about this. And where's that money going? Now bear in mind, this is assuming that property only was sold once in that 20 years. If it had been sold along the way once or twice, they get another slice of that. Now what do they have to do for this? Does anyone know what they get paid for that for? It must be something huge, yes? Do they chauffeur you to the property to inspect it? Do they, give you something? No, they just go, sold, move on, next. Why is this so? And we are, as an industry, are not saying a word. In the affordability report, none of this is discussed. GST refund is not discussed. GST impact, not discussed. FIRB, not discussed. That's wrong. And these are supposedly knowledgeable people. So to me, the big worry is they're now saying, oh look, we're going to fix this. We're going to make stamp duty not an upfront cost. We're going to make it like a land tax every year. Beautiful. That'll help everybody. Oh my God, what a disaster. Why? Because if you look at the stats, currently land tax is only paid by people that are renting that property out. If you live in it, it's not there. Most Australians don't even know land tax exists. But what they're looking at here is there's 5.5 million people in Australia that are not paying land tax now. And guess what? They're not even paying stamp duty because they're living in that house and probably not going to sell it. And when they transfer it through their will to their kids, there's no stamp duty on death. So that might stay in the house, in the family for generations and never a cost. So that's not good if you're a government. You say, hold on. Wouldn't it be nice if we got a little bit of a clip every year and then, oh look, all of a sudden they got 5 million. Now, do you think they're going to drop land tax for everybody if it goes from 2 million of the clients to 6 million? No way. They'll just say, oh, how it is we like. Let's do it. I've got clients in Sydney that have land tax bills of 75 to 80% of their rents. If you've got an old house on a good block, God help you. In Queensland, it's getting out of whack, right? And you can see the land tax, if you're a foreigner, it's massive. Why? These people are stimulating the industry, helping you out, paying good prices. Let's just slaughter them at the wheel. Why not? I want to talk about efficiency because, again, when you're now in a compromised world, your cost of construction is escalating, your profit margins are a threat, you're not convinced. I'm giving you the upside, try get more, try to get to the more valuable client, but you still got to make sure your business is running. And efficiency costs you in two places, time and money. In terms of time, you don't want to miss this cycle. How long will this last? I don't know. I've got to tell you, I think it's got a lot of legs, because that epiphany moment of that $1 million spare cash is going to be there for a long time. People have a very different attitude when they're wealthy or feel wealthy. But when you have a house, no matter how valuable it is, with a huge stonking mortgage, you don't feel wealthy, do you? You come home every night and you go, oh, my house is really valuable, but how am I going to make the mortgage? I still can't afford anything. But all of a sudden you sell that, you've got a nicer house, and you've got a couple of $1 million in the bank, you're bulletproof. That changes everything. That's going to stimulate the economy, stimulate the property market, stimulate everybody's life. The only thing I think is worrisome, who's going to do the work? Everybody's going to say, oh, I'm going to retire early. We'll hold a seminar and no one will turn up because no one's at the office. But you don't want to miss this cycle, but you've got legs, you're going to be okay. But if you're efficient, you can respond to these changes. You can be in Sydney quickly. You can say, hey, I've got what you want. You can, hey, tell me what you want. You can get into your pre-starts and get your construction going faster if you get your pre-sales done because you're efficient in your sales program. You can get your construction cost as low as possible because if you can get that down narrow from concept to start build to finish, then hopefully you don't get any escalations because you were quick and efficient because you got your pre-sales done and you got it in. And then of course you want to get the last few sales done out quick. This is stuff you know, but it's amazing how many developers don't have the tools to do it. Knowledge is great, but without the tools, it's useless. And then money, how many times I've seen people blow money on marketing campaigns and not even know if they were successful or not, it kills me. And then you have to reboot it with more new money that you don't really have in the hope that you succeed next time and usually fail because you didn't change anything. What's the thing, the sign of insanity is doing the same thing expecting a different result. You've got to do it properly and you've got to give those buyer incentives if you haven't got your sales. You become desperate, you're under pressure. What do I have to do? I've upgraded you, I've discounted you, I'll pay your stamp duty. Then of course your funding, it just blows out at the end. When you're fully funded and you have to get those last few sales and you're still trying to find that bit of paper with people on. So your efficiency is a massive impact on your business, and for a long time you've been able to get away with it. But I'm telling you, this moment in time, with this change of construction cost, with the change in market, you're not going to be able to hide in the cracks anymore. If you're inefficient, it's going to stand out like the proverbial, and you need to change your thinking. You know, and your database is your secret, you know, and I've just put up there, a lot of people think a database is just a mail list. It's not, for God's sake. It's your business, it's your heart and soul. It's your absolute weight of death or survival. And you have to start thinking like that in the modern age. You've got the tools to do it, you have to put them into play. You know, it's strategic information, it's strategic opportunity. You have to know what people want, why they bought from you, why they didn't. Because if you know that, it's a lot easier to sell it. It's like you guys have just had a lovely meal delivered. How do they know you want to eat that? Because you told them that. How'd you like it if we just said, oh, here you go, we just served this today? You go, oh, I don't eat fish. Oh, bad luck. This is how we do it here. You need to know what people want. Your database is your menu. You can say, hey guys, would you tell us, do you like fish or chicken or beef? Or these days, vegan? We need to know that. Because let me tell you, it's a lot easier when you go into the kitchen and say, oh look, we've got 5 people that want a steak, let's cook that. Nothing comes back saying, oh no, I don't like this, give me something else. We're the same. Development industry, it's the same. Sales industry, it's the same. Have to ask so you can do it. When you get that information, then that gives you incredible opportunity, because you can change your thinking, change your planning, change your delivery. That's what a database is about. It's not a list of names. And then it's the tools to connect, and it's the tools to do everything. The tools to empower your quality people in your business to say, hey, go find this out for me. Go tell this, go talk to the people that are like that. Go see if they want to buy. Go see if they don't want. And let your people do the job. If you've got a good system, and this is what we build, then less time spent in creating and gathering information, more time spent in acting upon it. One of the things that breaks my heart being an accountant and an administrator is seeing people that their boss comes in and goes, I need to know this right now. And they have to go off and pick up all these files and dig into all these spreadsheets for days. And they come back with a 1-page going, here it is. And the boss goes, hey, I thought so, and chucks it straight in the bin in 2 seconds. If you're going to look at it and throw it in the bin in 2 seconds, you need a button to push so the report only took seconds to create. And that's what a database properly does. And all the elements that make it successful, visibility, connectivity, accountability, efficiency, outcome, that's what we built in Complete Empire, because we know what it takes to do that. So we're giving you those tools to make it better. Knowledge is power, and power is survival these days. So, hopefully today we've given you a good dose of knowledge from the other side. Stuff that you probably knew, but you may not have looked at it in the same way. So I hope that's been informative for you. I thank you for your time and attendance, and we'll look forward to taking some questions and seeing how we go. Thanks everybody.